Hello and welcome. Today we've got Sean O'Hara, who's a clinical psychologist, and today we are going to be discussing how AI is affecting memory and freedoms and attention. Now, just before we begin, you can subscribe to my Instagram channel at nicholas.veniamin for all my daily newsreels. Sean, thank you so much for joining me. How are you and what have you been up to, sir?
Well, Nick, it's great to see you. First time this year, so happy New Year to you. I've
Happy
caught a
New
couple
Year.
broadcasts, and I hope you had a good time over the holiday. For myself, I was just hitting the golf ball around the desert and with the family, and had a nice time. And myself and my colleagues have been back in the office and just gearing up to 2024. Which, by the way, this is the last year of the first quarter of the new the new century. Amazingly enough, we're just ending that now. So we're really looking ahead and really what this year holds for us in a lot of ways and
Mm,
comparing that, of course, to people we see coming into the office. So,
absolutely. Now, moving on to AI, I want to ask you, i- if the right people or if the right governments, were, had the best interest for the humanity, can there be any positive outcome for AI?
um, well, absolutely. AI, it could be brilliant stuff, it will be brilliant stuff, but it depends. What is it used for? Who's in charge of it? Who's programming it? And what are they programming it for? Think about it. It's like man's evolved over all these years. We've learned everything about our natural science, physical science, medical science, as much as that we can up to this point. We'll make other discoveries. But all of a sudden, we made the computer, we made the three-dimensional computer chip. And now we're surrendering to that and about to let it take over in certain ways where we couldn't go. So used positively, AI can help us end cancer. It can help us end diseases. It could help us, map out the universe. It could help us with problems of protecting environment. It can do things for us that our brains aren't ready to go to, or are not capable of going to at this point. But again, it's who's programming it and how is it used. So
So you absolutely. So obviously, you're worried and concerned as a clinical psychologist at how the AI is affecting us.
yeah.
And as long as, you're saying that as long as it, although we can't control it, and it's affecting us all, you're saying that there's a possible chance that at a later date in the future, if the right people get involved, we can turn it around and it could work for us, not against us.
Yes, absolutely. And it's already been around for a while. They've been building up to the full use of AI, but it's been used by military and the governments, and of course, big tech is all over it. They're proponents of it. We spoke before and about Elon and his talk with Tucker Carlson, and Elon came up and was like, "Look, we need to stop and put policies and procedures in place first." And then develop AI before just letting it run crazy, having it programmed by people who maybe have nefarious things in mind. And then when bad things happen because of it, then going back and putting policies and procedures in place. It's just good common sense. But just to give you an idea, I think of how AI is building up. It always takes like a war, a pandemic, an epidemic, a terrorist attack, an assassination, or just look at the 20th century, an assassination first and then a war, and that's what the 20th century, if we just look at the history of the 20th century, it's about as plain as day how things have panned out. Now we're in the 21st century. We're ending the first 25 years of it, the first quarter of it, and look at what's happened. We've had 9/11. As a result, then President Bush put in the Patriot Act. What happened after that? Cameras went up everywhere. That was kind of like rudimentary AI. It was like our physical privacy. You go outside of the house, You go to the store, the airport, your office, and what you get photographed by cameras that are all over the place. You know, 100 times, 200, 300 times. And of course, it's done in the name of, safety, avoiding crime, being able to track possible criminals, child abduction. So it's always done for this noble cause. But the downside is there's a lot of people out there that would just like privacy who aren't doing anything wrong, but it's an infringement. So every time we have an event, what happens afterwards? We see a greater conformity, confinement, uh, control over the population. There's a certain compromise. We give up something to supposedly get something. So that's one aspect, our physical privacy. And AI and the event of 9/11, Patriot Act, that took that away from us. Okay. Now that that's gone, by the way, that's gone. That's never changing. You go to the store, you put in your credit card, little chip on it will tell you where you're at. You leave home with this thing, which everybody does, and you go out anywhere, Nick, and they, unless you've got your computer and your phone in a Faraday bag, they know where you are at all times. So again, there's nowhere to hide on the little blue planet, but it is just an infringement on our physical privacy. Now, what do they want? And here's where AI kicks in, is they want to intrude upon where we go into cyberspace. They want to, and I've said this before last time we talked, the internet is still our bastion of free speech. Without it, we don't have our First Amendment. I just can't say that enough. And they're trying to encroach on that. And they want this digital ID. They want everybody vaccinated when they want them vaccinated. They want to kind of control where people travel, where you spend money, where you go online, what your beliefs are, what you post online. And now, instead of a physical control, they want to go inside our heads, literally, and know where we're at all times and what we're doing and what we're affiliated with.
Mm.
It's like just a kind of almost a spy program, and therefore they can control it because AI can redirect where we go. It can cut off from what we see and what we take in. So, one, our physical privacy, that's gone. That's history. Now, the next encroachment is our inner space. What's going on in our head? What do we watch? There's even eye scans for identification now. And this is just really dangerous stuff. And this is what, again, I really believe Elon was hitting on when he talked about, look, we need policies and procedures, boundaries, limits, personal protection for the individual before we just run crazy with this. And AI is causing us to move so rapidly into the future. It's scary. And it's, again, we got to stop and reconsider this stuff before we go further. Mm-hmm. And one other point, and that is that the smarter technology gets, the dumber we get. We become over reliant on it. Think about cars developed these days. You have sensor signals on each side of it. So if you run too close because you're on your phone watching something probably of little or no value sometimes, it's letting you know that you're about to cause an accident. So again, all of this stuff is causing us to use our brains less and over reliance on computers. And so that's AI working. It's going to keep building, and there's going to be problems associated with it.
Although some people think it's not a big deal, what you're with stuff like the technology helping us, it's still the lack of exercise of us being able to figure things out ourselves. We're not using that part of the brain, and it's making us dumber. It's making us more lazy. It's making us more reliant, and eventually unable. And when we have a generation who is like that, raising young children into the new generation, it's a recipe for disaster for our future. Now I want to ask you, with you being a clinical psychologist and you seeing with what's happening around the world, with the amount of protest that's going on, with the farmers in Germany and the convoy we're going to see at the southern border in January, with the amount of awakening that there is at this level of corruption, how do you see the people responding in respect to protest when the level of corruption increases to that level that we're talking about today?
Yeah, well, that's a great question. First of all, if you've seen the protests in the Netherlands, Sweden, France, Germany around elections and stuff like that, um, it- you see it because you go to different places on the internet to see that. You won't catch that like on mainstream state media. You're not going to see it there. You only see that really because you go to certain websites where they still will show, look at the size of this protest. For the most part, they're trying to keep that away from, I think, the population at large, unless it's a cause that they like could be something of racial tension or a candidate that could be running that they don't like, and they show big protests on that. They'll flood the airwaves with that. But I see many parents, as do my colleagues, and they're very concerned about their kids' just over dependence on the media. They get stuck on a video game. They get stuck on um, watching television or playing or just watching TikTok and constant videos. I mean, some kids and adults just all day will spend the great majority of their waking 16 hours, Nick, just looking at media that just isn't really that important. So, and at the expense of doing productive things, sports, music, reading books, other forms of very important learning that help develop all regions of the brain, not just specific ones. So,
Mhm.
let's just talk about real quick, since we're heading from kind of AI into memory and multitasking, because this is so critical. AI is getting smarter. We're getting dumber, by the fact we're more reliant on it to make decisions for us. Um, our most valuable, I hope everybody gets this. I've been talking about this for decades. Every day, our most valuable attribute, the most valuable thing that we possess every minute of the day that we're awake is our focus and our attention. Those two things make up our consciousness
Mhm.
and working memory in this moment. So, anybody listening to this right now, they're using their working memory, their consciousness, and their attention. Whatever we give our attention to, we amplify, we turn it up. So, if it's really good attention to something that's really important coming from a good source, and we have a sustained attention to it, that's where memory starts to work. When we have an over reliance on the media or an over reliance on say bad information or wrong information.
Are you worried about the effects that higher inflation rates will have on your investments? Are you trying to secure your retirement savings against losses, but you notice that inflation is a hot topic these days? But how dangerous are low inflation rates on your retirement savings? An inflation rate of 2% may not seem like much, but it means that prices will just about quintuple over the lifetime of the average American. And 4% average inflation rate means that something that costs $1 when they're born will cost $23 when they die. That demonstrates the danger of even low inflation rates. So when it comes to gold and inflation rates, many investors want to know whether inflation rates have an effect on gold prices. What history indicates is that over the long term, increased inflation should lead to correspondingly higher gold prices. From September 1971 to August 2020, gold grew 7.5 times as much as inflation. Not only can an investment in physical gold help protect your assets against the damage done by inflation, it can also help grow the value of your retirement portfolio over the long term. If you're looking to protect your retirement assets, why wait until stock markets crash and gold begins to rise in price?
Up their accents. Is it a little bit like that? There's that kind. Is it like a disease to the brain, that this kind of virus? The brain is learning a different environment, which is cyber.
I've never considered that, but that's a great example. When you go to a different country and you speak in one accent, and because you're exposed to something else, you're learning another. Yeah, that's actually very much what it is like. It's like a great point. Whatever we put our attention on is what we amplify, and whatever we focus on, it's our consciousness.
Mm. Let me ask
So,
you. Let me ask
sure.
you this. Um, for those of us, obviously, who many of us who are, using cyber, like our phones, our social media, mainstream media, television, films, Netflix, etc. Those of us that we can't help it, how can we? Which exercises do you advise as a clinical psychologist for us to undertake, for us to improve our interaction with the physical world if we're being lazy out, into the cyber world?
Well, again, our phones, the internet, the constant flow of information, this is addictive. This is clearly addictive stuff. And internet has impacted our learning and memory in profound ways. We have a finite amount of memory that we can deal with on a consciousness or an attentional level. And after that, it's like that's as much as we can process at a time. Think of your body. If you work out and take care of yourself, think of your body as all the different components of your body. You might work out your arms, your chest, your legs, yoga, work on stretching. Well, the brain's the same way. And when the brain gets locked into just one form of learning, and again, AI is really going to pull to take people's attention 100% of the time on the internet. What you're doing is only working out a certain part of your brain. And by doing that, you're defeating the areas of your brain associated with more remote and, more importantly, longer term memory. You're cutting that out because it's so immediate, it's so attention focused that it steals away from the other regions of your brain that need to be developed. So that's why when kids are playing video games all day, or even adults are just watching one particular kind of video all day, that's real focused, it's real attention driven, but they're not working out the regions of their brain associated with longer term memory and being able to take that memory in a good way, but also retrieve it in a good way.
So, what in reality, what type of day-to-day activities do we take naturally that would help us keep our long-term memory?
Yeah, it's a balance. We just like working your body out in different regions. You need to spend part of your time. It's unavoidable watching whatever news you believe to be true, uh, educational stuff on the internet. Spend 3 to 4 hours doing that. But you need to be out doing sports. You need to be out interacting socially, face to face with people to develop communication skills, to be able to pull up, facial recognition and social nuances. And again, sports does that. Competitive sports does that. Playing an instrument, doing artwork, just going out in nature, anywhere in nature and just observing. This is causing greater depth of our brain being used in the way it needs to be used. When we have just a focus on one thing and it's, multitasking and we're going from one thing to another. By the way, if you have two screens up at once, for anybody, I don't know why it does that. But when you have two screens up at once, you're multitasking. So some people may be listening to this and they're reading something else, maybe today's homework or reviewing some lecture they have to do today. What's happening is that is affecting our prefrontal and our orbital frontal cortex areas of the brain. And what research has shown is, Nick, that's reducing our gray matter and reducing matter. So again, we're just not retaining this stuff. It's immediate. It's this, again, transactive memory. It's only good while you're online, and you go offline, and all of a sudden, wow, what do I remember? Little bits and pieces that don't always fit together.
So we need to be aware of this so we can start making a conscious effort of remembering, doing sports, talking to people face to face, being more social, and having, real deep conversations face to face, and maybe this would help, and sports and exercise and stuff like that, and eating, healthy eating. And I think is this your message for the people?
Well, absolutely. And this is just common sense stuff. And people need to really strike a balance. In a way, myself and colleagues, we're kind of worried about how this next year. I mean, we have a massive presidential election coming up in November. We have two war situations, possibly three, if you include what's happening in Taiwan, um, coming up. And we're going to have just an assault on our senses, a demand by the mainstream media and the state media to look here, look here, look here, look here. It's going to just scream for our attention. And really, when I think about just the upcoming presidential election, I just and what the media is going to do, it's sad. It's just so sad. It's pathetic, really, what it comes down to. I mean, it's just going to be such a horrible name calling bloodbath, false flag, psyop, all this horrible rabbit hole they're going to drag the majority of the population into. And we're all concerned about that. And so, what part of it is, yeah, the physical balance, as you said, I think that's critical. But the other part is, and I've said this before, it's like we need to be very discriminant what we give our attention to.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And the media and AI and all this stuff is going to just crave commanding the individual's attention. And I really believe it will turn into just diversion and keeping people from focusing on more important things or developing their own critical thinking and their own objectivity. Individuals need to decide what they believe and what they think for themselves and not let the media tell you what to think. I even heard a newscaster on one show. I just was horrible. I wanted to throw up. And she came out and said it was kind of like a hot mic situation. And she came on and said, it's up to us to tell the people what to think. I mean, and this was 5-8 years ago now. It's up to they really believe that. That's how deep down what they do is so controlling. And again, when you bring in something like AI, which is already controlling our physical environment, and now they want to intrude completely on our brains and our belief system, and it's going to come from all sources. It already is coming from all sources, but now it's going to have its own algorithms and how to make it even more convincing, more wag the dog, more compelling. So it's
absolutely
a big year coming.
It is a big year coming. Absolutely. Or Sean O'Hara, thank you very much for sharing everything with us today. Is there anything else that you'd like to say to the viewers before we finish?
As always, go read a book, find multiple source information, always do your own research. In today's day and era, we need to spend more time coming up with our own real thoughts and our beliefs and not relying on other sources, no matter how compelling, to immediately buy what you're being sold. And so it's just critical. Do your own research and find your own truth and be good with that. Because if you don't exercise that part of your brain, then you're going to suffer. Someone else will tell you what to think. So
absolutely. Well, thank you very much, Sean, and we'll speak again very soon. You take care and God bless you. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Nick. Bye-bye now.